Okay, this is going to be part 2. I've got a chunk of what's probably maple here, and it's not going to make too much of a difference if it's on a hickory handle, because what it's going to do is just act as a little bit of a add-in to make it look even when the rawhide wrap is on it. So that's it. What we're going to do first off is this has kind of a natural triangular shape, with this side being very close to the way we want it to set in here. So we're going to take a measurement, about right there, make a scrape, and shear cut. Then we're going to come in from the bottom side and round it off, or flatten it off a little bit. We're going to flatten down the side. This has got a little bit of a curve up, so we'll curve this. And then just start checking the fit. By the way, Backwoods Brooks Puko, it works quite nicely. We're almost there. Let's add a little bit less mass down here. Wow. My hands are still greasy. So that. Okay. Come back, cut this sharp ridge off, or this will be a little bit easier to hang on to. We've got a flat there, the interface is properly, but we need it to bend a little bit. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this edge, which will then get filled with glue, which is stronger than the wood anyways, so that won't be a big problem. And it should allow us to get a good solid seam all the way around. Just like that. That's what we call close enough, good enough. Now this end can get sheared like that. Shear it off to where it's closer to the end shape. And this can get glued right on. All I'll do is just throw a jam knot around it, Canadian jam knot, to tighten it down and hold it tight. And then we just got to wait for it to dry, and then we can get on with the wrapping. Okay, I ended up using clamps because it did work out pretty well. I don't know how well you can see that because The viewfinder is not in focus. But we just used cheap Elmer's wood glue, $3.85 for a nice big bottle, and it works quite well. So we'll just wait for that to dry. It usually takes like 10-15 minutes before it's dried out, at least for me. But it could take up to 2 hours to dry and set, depending on how warm it is. So I'm going to go set this by the fire, see if it'll heat it up nice and fast. And while that's happening, I have other work to do, so I'll come back in probably about like 2 hours. Should be good enough to get back to here. So I guess you'll see me in a second. Okay, so here's that woodchuck hide. It's a very thin but very tough hide. And it's surprisingly easy to make. All I did was got a woodchuck, skinned it, which was very tough to do, as far as in your knife will want to skate off of the skin. It's that tough. And then I let it sit in water with ashes in it, about 3 cups of ashes, hardwood ashes, and water. For future reference, that didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to. So next time I'm going to be filling about half of the bucket with ashes and half with water, just enough. So they'll get soupy when you fill water up over to the top of them. But then fill the rest of the bucket full of water and dunk this in. The other thing is I waited till after it was done sitting in that water for 3 days to flush it out. That was a big mistake. You need to flush it out beforehand while the hide is still not stinky, because just sitting there scraping on a stinky hide for hours is just ridiculous. It'll also be a little bit easier on you to do it then, just for the reasons of it's not as slimy, because it will get slimy. Other than that, leave it in 3 to 4 days. I recommend after the 3rd day, pull it out and see how well the hair picks off around the edges, because that's where I had problems picking out hair. The middle of the hide, no problem. It's nice and smooth. The sides have hair all over them, because that's where it was on the belly, and it had a lot of thick hair, as in thick hairs that were hard to pull out, and not thick hair. The thick hair, as in lots of hairs per square inch, was on the top, and that was real easy. It peeled right off, along with all the very top epidermis and all the dirt and grunge that was on the skin. Came off real easy. So what we're going to do is this clean top section is going to go to a friend who wants to make a drum out of rawhide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off right here for our axe cover, where there's a bunch of the grease, because it was setting like this, and a lot of grease ended up dripping down in there because it was still a little greasy as it was drying out. So what I'm just going to do is, while it's strung up here, I'm just going to pop in behind this nail and cut this just like that. There's our rawhide. And we'll try to pop it off with the nails. If anything, I'll just cut, you know what, I'll just cut these off. nice and tough. Just how I like my rawhide. Makes it hard to work with until it gets wet again, but makes sure that it's really nice and tough. So what we'll end up doing is I'm going to need to scrape this a little bit better, and then we'll pick out a section like right here that will wrap around our axe head, and then we'll have another section for another axe head eventually. So I'm going to split this right down, probably not right down the middle, but more like off to the side, and give us a big section. Give it a little bit of a scraping with the spine of my knife to get all the yicky extra stuff off, and then we're going to have to wash it. That's going to get a lot of the grease and oil out from the woodchuck, which woodchuck are very, very greasy animals. They've got a lot of fat in them. Very similar to possum and raccoon. But just Dawn dish soap, scrub the ever-loving, you fill in the blank, out of both sides, preferably with something like a Scotch-Brite or a steel wire scrubber, to where you get some fibers to stick up, because that will help it to adhere to your project. And then what we'll do is we'll punch holes and lace it up the back, since this is just going to be a protector and not a full-fledged wrap all the way around. This will come up just to the back, and then it'll get cut down to the shape of the hump on the back, and then just get laced over that hump. And that's all we'll need to do, and we'll do that while this is soaking wet. The reason for that is because then we can stretch it nice and tight, and then as it dries, it will tighten and it will self-conform to the axe handle itself. And while this is going to be a very thin, extra protective coating, one, you shouldn't be overstriking, which is something that I do. I couldn't be an instructor at this point in time because I'm not as good as I would like to be at any of the stuff that I would have to teach, so I'd walk up and make a fool of myself. Not that that's a bad thing. We should all make fools of ourselves at certain points in time. But, yeah, you shouldn't be overstriking, and all this is there to do is to help prevent overstrikes. And we'll be gluing this. We'll put a layer of that wood glue on underneath this as well, which will also help to stiffen everything up, make it super nice and solid. So I'm going to get the rest of this cut off for our friend who is going to make a drum out of it, and then I will be back cleaning this up. Okay. Biggest thing that we got to do is make sure that this backside is at least somewhat devoid of the greasy, lumpty-bumpty, membranous material, and that the top side is free from some of this hair that was left on. So, since it's dried out, we'll just take this slight curve at the edge of our knife, which is also sharpened spine, and we'll just basically rub that stuff till it rips off. And soaking. That's pretty much it. Get you a close-up shot. So that's Like I said, it's really thin, but it's pretty tough for what it is. I was originally intending to try and use this as a shield covering because as a lot of the old manuals state, horsehide is one of the best coverings you can have for a shield. Well, this is really thin and pretty tough. So I thought, it's probably about half as thin as horsehide. So what if I take 2 layers of this, face the front, 1 layer and face the back, and all I'll have to do is take 4 or 6 of them and stitch them all together. Cut them into squares and stitch them together. Well, I didn't get to that because this was the only woodchuck that I was able to get this year. I'll have to probably set up traps next year when we start getting them running around again and try to get. I probably need like, I don't know, a dozen of them to get those 2 layers, because what I'd end up doing for the first layer on the front is I'd cut out for stitch and cut out 2 layers for front and back, and then I'd take all the scraps, just the junky scraps, and sew all of those together to fill in for the inside. But this will work well for our axe protector right now, and it's very translucent. It'd just be nice if it was cleaner. You could almost see through it. So yeah, let's go wash this off. Just get it wet. Then we're going to take some Dawn dish soap. And just put a bunch on there, and we're going to scrub it. Now, I'll need both hands to do that, so I will bring you back eventually. But I think I'm going to use a scrub brush for right now, because we got a nail brush that should work just fine. Optimally, you use Scotch-Brite or a steel scouring pad. But since I don't have any that I can sacrifice right now to the good of scrubbing rawhide, I'll have to forego that right now. But it won't be too big of a deal. We'll just scrub it up, rinse it off, and it should be good, because then once we get it scrubbed off, we'll cut it to the general shape once we have our handle set up properly. And then we will get this and we'll soak it in warm water until it's soft and pliable. We'll also have to poke some holes in there beforehand, and then we'll lace it up the back with probably bank line is what I'm thinking of. So I'll get to work and see you later. The axe. I got the rawhide, and I clamped this instead of using bank line just because it turned out to be easier. Everything's nice and tight in there, so I'm just going to come in with my knife and just start trimming away all the excess material here. Now, I am pulling towards my hand, but you'll notice I've choked up on the knife, and I have my arm resting against my stomach. This will mean that I can only come up so far. And I'm just taking light curls, chunking that off real gentle. goal is to just hog off all the material that doesn't need to be there. And then smooth it out slightly. Don't have to worry about getting it super smooth, because this is all going to get covered with rawhide. So that's good for about right there. Now I'm going to come down, since I'm going to be cutting towards the steel of the blade. I'm going to put all of my pressure on with my thumb here, so that this hand can focus on controlling the blade, so we don't go hitting the head and destroying our knife's edge. Just gotta come down real gentle. Just pop that off. Now, get a close up here to pop the end off. I'm gonna switch around, just clean up all of that. My darn camera cut you off super fast. So we cut out the rawhide, punched 5 holes on each side, and that will just get wrapped around like so. So I'm gonna go in, I'm going to get this wet. It'll take about 10 minutes. Get it to where it's nice, soft, and pliable. Then we're going to put some glue over all this, smear it around, and then lace this up. So I'll be right back. Okay, so this last part is going to be a little bit difficult to film, but I've got the axe clamped down there. Our rawhide has been soaking. And just dry it off. Just pat it dry like that. Now, this looks like the way it's going to go. So I'm going to try to lace with number 36 bank line. And I think I will do this off camera. But we're just going to spread glue all over this. So that's probably about enough. But yeah, get that, and then I'll tie it up there and bring it back. Okay, there it is, set up. Drop that off. Now all I got to do is clean up all the glue and wait for that rawhide to shrink. So I'll set this in front of the fire and we'll see what happens. Okay. So there you have it. Turned out to be a pretty nice fix. Everything's nice and tight. It shrunk right in all the way around the handle. The glue is going to hold this in place. The lacing now is basically just for show, because the glue should hold everything far more securely, in fact. So yeah. Yeah, can't do this. There we go. Nope. Oh, left-handedness. Yeah. Okay, instead of watching me fail to stick an axe in left-handed, I think we're just gonna call it good. Or I'll just do it right-handed. That works too. Okay. So, this has been Philip Brooks from Backwoods Brooks Knives, signing off.